Rune casting. Everyone's into rune casting. Never done rune casting. It's not that I'm not interested in it. It's just it's not at the top of my to-do list yet. So it's not something that I've really done. Um, I know enough Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon terms to get me through ritual, but haven't taken the time to learn how to speak it yet, just because it's not at the top of my to-do list. The easiest way to avoid burnout that I have found is do the things that you're interested in first once you've done the basics. Like everyone should read the Eddas, browse through the sagas, Saxo, hit some of the old school sources first to get a foundation. And then after that, look at the things that interest you. Rome and heathenry were not built in a day. Like it took our ancestors from the dawn of time until the end of the Viking Age to build up what they had.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a really interesting topic too, with runes. One might say, hearing that, as a Gothi, right? Like you would, like I think one might argue that, well, man, then how can you be Gothi if you don't do rune readings or cast runes or use runes for divination? You know what I mean? Like one might argue that that's almost a rudimentary, basic sort of thing that any Gothi should be proficient in. We talked earlier about some of the things that we might think of in terms of what are some of the mandatory or required bits. You mentioned the lore, knowing, but more importantly, knowing the lore of your tribe, and the mythos of your tribe. Interestingly enough, right, knowing the runes and all that wasn't part of your list. And I think that's an interesting observation, because again, a lot of people might just assume that that's every Gothi should have their own runes and know how to read them and all this stuff.
Yeah, and I would agree to an extent. So, like, I know what the runes are. I have combed my way through what they actually are, how to pronounce all of them. Rune casting, just again, I find it interesting, but it's just not at the top of my to-do list. But as a leader, because again, going back to a Gothi's central role is the spiritual leader of the tribe. So I have this one thing that I am not super knowledgeable in. But what I have been able to do is cultivate a sister in the tribe, our sister Sarah. She is very Odinic in her practices and does rune readings and stuff like that. So it's like, while I can be honest enough and humble enough with myself and others to go, I don't know how to do that, but I know someone who does.
Mm-hmm.
Who's very knowledgeable, who will help you or, help us as a tribe, or whatever. So again, to me, the central role of Gothi goes back to spiritual leader and teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that also exist in the dynamic of the members of a group, where the Gothi is like they preside over the ritual. They do a lot of the ritual work, but any of the magical stuff, the divination, like any of the things that rune castings and whatnot might fall under, they don't do. They leave that to, in this particular example that I'm about to give, that person was the tribe's Volva.
Mm-hmm.
And they work hand in hand. The Volva and the Gothi work very closely when it comes to the ritual setup and how they're going to do this or that. But when it comes to any of the workings of the divinatory work, even the Gothi in that group didn't dabble in it. They left that to the person who was designated for that type of thing. So just because of the name, just because the title maybe invokes certain images or certain ideas of what should come with that job, not always the case. But to
Yeah.
have somebody in that position, to have that sort of resource dedicated to that thing, right? That box gets checked. Those bases are covered. We've got it when we need it, kind of thing.